Hi, my name is Sarah, and I'm 26 years old. I became an orphan at a young age when my parents tragically died in a car accident. With no extended family to care for me, I was placed in an orphanage where I spent about 3 years before being adopted. My adoptive parents turned out to be billionaires, completely transforming my life. They gave me a loving and fulfilling childhood, but they preferred to keep my adoption private, believing in doing good without seeking attention. When I turned 18 and moved into my own place, my adoptive parents focused on expanding their business. They traveled to Europe in search of new opportunities. Around that time, I met Mark, my now ex-husband, while we were in college. We clicked almost instantly. Mark was cheerful, caring, and as we went on dates, our bond deepened. Eventually, we became an official couple. Everything seemed perfect between us, except for one significant issue. Mark's family didn't like me. I met them for the first time after we graduated and had found stable jobs. By then, Mark and I had been together for 4 years and were already engaged. He wanted to introduce me to his parents when he felt we were both in a secure place in our lives, but he had warned me that they were judgmental about who their children dated. This made me nervous, especially since they had no idea about me or our engagement. The night before meeting them, I couldn't hide my anxiety. "They're going to hate me," I told Mark. "They won't," he reassured me. "Do you really think they won't judge me even more when they find out we're engaged?" I asked skeptically. "Even if they do, it won't matter. Their opinions don't affect how I feel about you," he said firmly. I wasn't entirely convinced. Should we wait to tell them about the engagement? Maybe we can ease them into it. I suggested. "I'm fine with that," he agreed. I decided to keep the engagement a secret for the time being. I was determined to win them over, even though Mark had often expressed doubts about their approval. Mark's family was wealthy and valued luxury. They expected their children to date people of equal or greater status. At the time, my life didn't meet their expectations. I hadn't shared much about my adoptive parents because I wanted to be judged for who I was, not for my background. We arranged to meet Mark's parents at an upscale restaurant. As we entered, Mark held my hand tightly. I had tucked my engagement ring into a necklace to keep it discreet. Unfortunately, things started on the wrong foot when we arrived 2 minutes late. Something Mark had warned me would irritate them. His parents greeted us with icy expressions. They glanced at me briefly, then continued chatting with Mark, blatantly ignoring me. Their indifference made me feel small, and I avoided their gaze until Mark finally spoke up. "Mom, Dad, this is Sarah, my wonderful girlfriend," he said, his tone firm. I mustered my courage and smiled. "Hello. It's a pleasure to meet you both," I said politely, even though I couldn't honestly say the same. His mother barely acknowledged me. "Hi," she replied coldly. "So, Sarah," she continued, her voice sharp, "I hear you and Mark met in college. Is that right?" "Yes, we did," I said. "We had some classes together. And how did you manage to attend such a prestigious school? The tuition is quite high, and admissions are competitive." His father cut in, his tone accusatory. "Dad, that's enough," Mark said firmly. "You will not speak to your father that way," his mother snapped. "It's a valid question, Sarah. Please answer." I took a deep breath, trying to remain composed. I was fortunate enough to receive a full scholarship. I'm incredibly grateful, not just for the education, but also for meeting Mark. "It's been one of the best things to happen to me," his mother scoffed. "Of course it is. Mark is loaded, and you clearly need that kind of money. At least you have some brains, because your looks aren't exactly impressive." "That's enough," Mark shouted, his voice rising. "We're leaving. Come on, Sarah." As we left the restaurant, I was in shock. I couldn't believe how cruel his parents had treated me. Their judgment had nothing to do with my character and everything to do with my perceived lack of status. It was an encounter I would never forget. I couldn't believe how cruel people could be, especially to someone's face. I was too stunned to process my emotions. The car ride home was silent. Mark was furious, his grip tight on the steering wheel. When we finally got home, Mark checked on me. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. But I wasn't. I didn't even know how to feel. I had dressed carefully, behaved politely, and avoided ordering anything expensive. Yet Abigail and Charles had judged me without hearing a word from me. After that awful dinner, Mark didn't speak to his parents for weeks. They sent him a text accusing us of being disrespectful for walking out, but Mark ignored it. When he finally replied a month later to tell them we were engaged, they were livid. Mark warned them that he wouldn't tolerate any more insults toward me. His parents reluctantly offered to pay for our wedding, but only if they could control every detail. Neither of us wanted that, so we decided to elope. My adoptive parents, still in Europe, supported our decision wholeheartedly. They were just happy to see me happy and even sent us a gift, an expensive painting. Mark raised an eyebrow at its value, but I brushed it off, knowing my parents were generous and had the means. Not long after our wedding, Abigail and Charles hosted an anniversary party and surprisingly invited me. I was hopeful that this might be a turning point. Maybe they were trying to make amends. But when we arrived, the evening turned into yet another humiliation. The other guests, around 30 of them, followed Abigail and Charles's lead, ignoring me entirely. I stayed close to Mark, but every attempt I made to join conversations was dismissed. People either looked me up and down before walking away, or kept speaking to Mark as though I hadn't said a word. By the end of the night, I felt completely humiliated. When Abigail and Charles gave a toast, their words only twisted the knife further. They joked about being so blessed to have everyone important in their lives here tonight, followed by pointed laughter. It was clear I wasn't included in that sentiment. The thinly veiled jabs continued, and I couldn't take it anymore. Quietly, I ordered an Uber and left, crying all the way home. When Mark got home later that night, he was livid. "Why did you walk out like that? Do you know how embarrassing that was for me?" he demanded. I stared at him, stunned. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Don't play dumb with me, Sarah. I had to listen to my parents yell at me for hours while everyone pitted me for being married to you. Are you serious?" I shot back. "What about me?" I was humiliated by everyone there. "Your parents mocked me during their toast. How can you expect me to just sit there and take that?" "I'm not saying it was right," Mark replied, frustrated. "But you could have dealt with it for one night. It was my parents' anniversary. For God's sake, you have no idea what it feels like to be treated that way." I said, my voice breaking. Everyone was laughing at me. "My parents expect an apology from you," he said coldly. "An apology from me?" I asked, incredulous. "I want one from them first. They humiliated me." Mark's voice hardened. "Maybe my parents were right about you. You're impossible." With that, he stormed off to the guest bedroom. I couldn't understand his sudden change in behavior. He had always stood up for me before. Was it really so bad for him? After I walked out, couldn't he see that my leaving was the clearest sign of how deeply they'd hurt me? The tension between us only grew. Mark didn't speak to me for a week. Meanwhile, I received a barrage of texts from his parents, calling me ungrateful and an embarrassment. I tried reaching out to Mark, but he ignored me. Finally, I decided to swallow my pride and apologize, even though it felt humiliating. I loved Mark and didn't want our relationship to fall apart over this. But things only got worse when Mark's parents began hosting weekly family dinners. Mark insisted on attending, and I went with him the first time. As soon as we arrived, the tension was palpable. Charles and Mark's siblings glanced at me awkwardly but said nothing, while Mark left me standing alone to catch up with his family. Abigail eventually appeared, her expression stormy. When she saw me, she marched over and demanded, "What are you doing here?" I was taken aback. "Excuse me? You heard me," she snapped. "What are you doing in my house right now?" "Well, you invited us for dinner," I replied, trying to keep my composure. I said, trying to keep my voice steady, I invited Mark. This is a family dinner. As Mark's wife, I'm part of this family, am I not? Absolutely not, Abigail snapped. An orphan like you deserves no place in this family. Did you think you could hide that detail from us? We do background checks on our children's spouses, and you are nowhere near my son's league. I will never accept you here. Why not? I asked, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. Is that the only thing that determines whether I belong in your family? You're judging me for my background, for things beyond my control. Does it not matter that I love your son and make him happy? She sneered. Happiness? If that made people rich, the world would be full of billionaires. You're ugly, poor, and you'll never fit into our elite circles. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Why are you being so superficial? Are you afraid I'll damage your reputation? You never even gave me a chance to prove who I am. Sarah, that's enough. Abigail spat dismissively, shoving money into my hands. Take this and get yourself a new dress. Leave now. I turned to Mark for support, but he simply stood there silent. His lack of defense for me stung more than his mother's words. With tears burning in my eyes, I grabbed the cash and left. The Uber ride home was a blur of tears and heartbreak. Mark's silence that night lingered. Days passed, then weeks, and still, he refused to talk to me. He acted like I was the one at fault for standing up for myself, even as his parents used my past as a weapon. For the first time in our marriage, I felt utterly alone. The weekly family dinners continued without me. At first, it hurt, but soon, I began to welcome the solitude. One night, desperate for comfort, I called my parents. "Hey, sweetheart," my dad said warmly when they answered. "How's everything going?" "It's not great," I admitted, my voice trembling. "What's wrong, honey?" my mom asked, concerned. "If you need help, you know we're always here for you." I hesitated before explaining. Mark's family is difficult. They're wealthy and snobby, and they've made it their mission to humiliate me. His mother even called me an orphan to my face. My mom gasped. She said, "What? How dare she insult you like that? Do they not know about us?" My dad's voice tightened with anger. "No, I never told them," I confessed. "I didn't want them to like me for my background. I want to be judged for who I am." "Sweetheart," my mom said gently but firmly, "are you sure this is the man you want to be with?" "I love him, but I can't live like this," I admitted. "Don't worry," my dad said, his voice laced with determination. "We'll handle this. Your mom and I are coming to visit next week, and we'll set things straight." Their words felt like a lifeline. For the first time in weeks, I felt hopeful. When my parents arrived, they treated me to a spa day, insisting I deserved it. While I was being pampered, they set their plan into motion. The next evening, they arrived unannounced at the family dinner Mark's parents were hosting at a posh restaurant. According to Dad, the atmosphere shifted the moment they walked in. Abigail and Charles recognized him immediately, their smug expressions faltering. "Mr. Larry?" Charles stammered. "What brings you here?" Dad smiled coolly. "Oh, I just happened to see some familiar faces and thought I'd say hello." "Familiar faces?" Abigail asked, confused. "Yes, my daughters-in-law," Dad replied, glancing around. "But where is Sarah? Your daughter?" Abigail stammered, color draining from her face. "Yes, Sarah's my daughter," Dad said. "My wife, and I adopted her years ago. I understand she's been having some issues with you." Abigail tried to defend herself. "She hid this from us. If we'd known..." Dad cut her off. "She didn't want special treatment because of her background. But now, I see why she felt the need to shield herself from people like you." He turned to Mark, handing him a folder. "These are divorce papers. My daughter deserves better than this." With that, my parents left. Later, I learned that Dad's business associates began withdrawing their support from Charles's company. It wasn't long before their empire began to crumble. Mark signed the divorce papers without a fight, while his family's cruel messages flooded my phone. I felt nothing but relief. My parents and I took a long vacation afterward, giving me time to heal and rediscover myself. Losing Mark was painful, but I learned an important lesson. I deserve love and respect, and I won't settle for less. I'm forever grateful to my parents for showing me my worth and helping me reclaim my life.